guys, we're going to jump into chapter 9 now, memory and info processing. As I'm sure you can imagine, for study skills and test taking, memory is key. But it's also important to understand how our memory works, and then we'll dive into some of those skills later in the semester. So here we start this lecture off with a clip from Finding Nemo. Of course, most of us probably know Dory. Her character has an issue with her short-term memory. So this particular clip, she's using different memory strategies to try to remember the address on your screen. You're welcome to watch the clip. I'm not going to show it here, but she does do some, she repeats, which is a big part of enhancing her memory, that repetition. She also makes a song out of the address and then pretends to have a conversation with herself, all of those to help her build her memory. And those are all memory strategies that we can use when studying. So we start off with how many times would you need to hear or say something, or hear or see something for you to remember it? Would it just be 10 times? Would it be 100 times? Most of my students usually agree that at least 1,000 times. If you saw and heard something for 1,000 times, you would remember it without any issues. So on that note, I have 6 pennies for you. They're all slightly different. Take a minute and just figure out which one do you think is the correct penny. One of them is correct, how a penny is. The other ones are not. And please don't use a real penny because this is a memory exercise, so don't cheat. And I'll give you a minute to look. All right. So I will tell you the answer is this guy. This guy is the correct penny. Most of us can agree that we've probably looked at pennies at least 1,000 times in our lifetime. The only student I've ever had without question that got this right, like it wasn't just a lucky guess, is one who had an uncle that did coin collecting. And is what important about memory is he had a reason to know why the penny looked a way that it did that most of us don't. I just need to know generally what a penny looks like so that I can use it in my piggy bank. But he had a reason to really look at it, and that's what we need for memories. We need to pay attention to stuff. Our brain works as a filter, and it gets rid of details. Every day we look and take in things that it gets rid of for us because we don't need all that excess information. And so we really have to make something important and practice and elaborate and rehearse with it to move it into that long-term memory. So the first step to that process is encoding. This really is how our brain puts a label on things. We don't really think about it. It does it automatically for us. But if we think of our brain as a giant storage cabinet, right, with different files and different drawers, the first thing it's going to do is put that label on there and then determine how to store it. There's the 3 types of encoding. So it's going to store it maybe by just words and their meaning. So think about flashcards, think about how you learned probably a lot of your vocabulary in school. Then, of course, the visual, where we associate it to different images. This is why I try to show you models in different ways, because I'm more of a visual person, and that'll kind of help you see it as a picture. And then acoustic, the encoding of sound. So I know for me, I cannot tell you the alphabet without singing the song. So if I'm trying to file something alphabetically, a lot of times I have to sing the song to the part where I need to get to remember, is R before or after T. And it's because I learned it through this acoustic encoding of sound. And sometimes it's embarrassing. I got to low key sing the song to myself so I can alphabetize something correctly because it's the way that I encoded it. Then the way, of course, the storage, these are our filing cabinets, right? This is how we put things together to make that permanent record. This is the information processing model is one big, beautiful picture. So you're going to start here. You will see that this is stimuli. This is the new information. It starts in our sensory memory, which can also be called our short-term memory. It's the same thing. We can remember very little here. We hold less here, and we lose it after about 3 seconds. So think about a phone number. If I gave you a phone number, my office number, 512-223-2190, after about 3 seconds, if you don't think it's important, if you don't need it for anything, your memory is gonna get rid of it because there's no reason in taking up space, right? But if I came back and said, okay, I need every person in this class to call my office number if you want an A in this course, 512-223-2190, Now you're going to pay attention, right? Now you've got a reason for it to be important, and you're likely, if you don't have your phone or a pen present, you're going to start doing what? You're going to start saying it over and over to yourself, right? You're going to start rehearsing it, getting it into it. You'll get it into your working memory where you can remember a little bit more. This is where you can remember about 7 to 9 chunks. So numbers are an easy way to show our chunking, right? Think about credit cards, think about how your social is, phone numbers. We never ever give out the numbers one long sequence. It's always broken up in pieces, and that's because that's the way our brain works. And if you start rehearsing that phone number, you'll last about 15 seconds without rehearsing it anymore, without writing it down somewhere and practicing it. Another way to think about it is think about numbers. Think about your social security number. Do you know your social security number? If you do, why? Is it because, like most of us, you had to use it for work applications, maybe financial aid applications, college applications? And for those that don't, is it because you never have to use it for anything? And then think about maybe your driver's license number. Do you know that number? Same questions. If you do, it's likely because you had to use it for different things. You had to fill it out on different forms. And if you don't, it's because you probably never had to really use it. And then my last example is always your license plate. We look at our cars every day. We have a license plate on the front and back. So you look at your license plate every day. But do you know that number? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not? I know for me, I don't, because I only have to use it once a year for my parking permit, and it saves it every year after that. Um, but I know my driver's license and my social security by heart because I've used them so many times on so many different forms. But I look at my car every day and I can't tell you my license plate number. Those other two, like I said, the social and the driver's license number, I have encoded. They are in this long-term memory forever. We can put as much as we want in our long-term memory. There's not a limit, and it's in there forever. It just takes all this work to get it there. But this is where that phrase is, like riding a bike, because it's in there. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to retrieve if it's been a while, but it's definitely in there if you've done a lot of rehearsal, maintenance, and elaboration with it and really used it. And then retrieving it we'll go into next. That's just, you encoded it. That's the same way you're going to pull it out. But it takes all this work right here to get it in that long-term memory. This is why cramming doesn't work, because you've not given it enough attention. You've maybe moved it into your working memory. You might be able to get through an exam, right? Let's say exam 1. What happens when you get to your final? This isn't here, right? You're going to have to learn 16 weeks of information all over again, and you're going to hate your life, I promise you. And then, of course, retrieving it is getting it out the same way we got it in. So for my ABCs, I can only retrieve it via song. So however you recoded it is how you're going to get it back out. You're going to go find that label, and your brain's going to pull it out for you. Again, this is one more time, good old Bloom's taxonomy, but it's a little bit different. So this time I've set it up differently so that it's the triangle, if you remember, was this way. So it was remembering, understanding, applying, then analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And this one is my most favorite because it shows that all three of these are almost equal, right? And we get to this process, we're going back and forth. We don't end at creating. We create, maybe come back to evaluating. And why is this important to memory? Here's another way to look at it. That sensory memory, that beginning is remembering. Obviously, that's that first step, trying to understand it. When we're moving into our working memory, we're moving into that understanding and applying. We're starting to see it in other similar situations. We've really moved it into our long-term memory when we can analyze, evaluate, and create something new, right? All of this is done in that long-term memory because now it's really yours. You really understand, you really know the information, and you're really able to move to those next steps. This is a forgetting curve. There is a Dr. Ebbinghaus who, I forget what it was that he gave a study of people certain information, and then he monitored how long it took them to forget the information. And he did it with, they weren't doing any memory strategies. That was kind of the point, is he gave them new information, and without practice, how long it took them to forget it. So here, immediately they're at 100%. You can see how dramatically this goes down as time goes by. So within 20 minutes, they've lost almost 50%. This percentage right here is how much they've remembered. Okay. And that's important. So they've lost almost 50%, not quite. One hour, they've lost over 50%. One day, they're only remembering 33%. Look at this, 6 days. They've lost 75% of that information. So you think about our class, for example, we meet once a week. So if we meet once every 7 days, and in between that first class and the next class, you haven't looked at any information, you haven't done any reading, any assignments, boom, you've lost 75% of what we did. And imagine you have 2 to 3 weeks in between exams. So from exam 1, we've started new information, and then we'll have exam 2 in about 2 weeks. Look how much information you've already lost in that first week. So this is why that repetition, that repeating, that reading, all the assignments in between, this is why they're there, is to help you with this curve so that we can stay up here. All right, let's look at some strategies. Knowledge acquisition strategies is a fancy way to say study strategies. We'll go into them more in another chapter later in the semester. So these are just kind of big picture strategies. But it wants you think about the concepts rather than just the facts. So think about, the facts are all the details that lead to it, but also what does it mean? Kind of go into that critical thinking. Of course, take cues from your instructors. If they're writing something down, if they're emphasizing, maybe they're circling it on the whiteboard. I often will in my lecture say, this is a test question. That's a cue. That's something that you want to make important to it. Look for those key terms that you're going to need and use summaries. We'll talk about this a lot in note taking as well. But paraphrasing, summarizing information is the best way to really move information into that understanding to applying, to get ready for that analyzing and evaluating, because it helps you determine, again, those knowledge gaps, the areas that you think you know, but it turns out you don't know so much. And it gives your brain a chance to really finesse with that information, kind of change it up, put it in your own words. So use summaries as much as you can. Start reviewing the material immediately. You should be looking at material both before and after class regularly throughout the week. You should have study sessions even if you don't have an exam that week. And then we recommend study frequently for shorter periods of time, which kind of mind blows a lot of students. But it really is, because you need to be engaged with the material more often. Having an 8-hour study session, one, your brain is likely to give up on you. It's like any sort of muscle, it's going to get tired. And then two, if you're engaging that information, that's going to give you some headway. But if you, again, go days without looking at it again, you're going to lose more than you've gained from that study session. Ways to strengthen your memory, of course, rehearsal. So repeating it over and over, incorporating visuals, putting something together if that helps you, creating mnemonics. Chunking is a big one. Remember that our brain has limits and it has ways that we absorb information. So however you can break it up is the best way to do that, instead of, again, that 8-hour study session isn't going to break things up for you necessarily. So break up that information. Connect the information, whether you can connect concepts within the textbook or you can connect it maybe in your personal life. I like to use a lot of analogies because that helps me connect information. Whatever makes sense to you, but how can you connect it to something that help you remember? And then, of course, sleep. Your brain works better when you've had enough sleep. That's just the way it is. Like anything else, it is a muscle. It is a part of our body, and it needs rest. It needs to be taken care of. And your memory is the first thing that starts to lapse when you haven't had enough sleep. Feel free to click on this video. It's a short little funny blurb from The Office about using mnemonics. The Office is a great show. And then finally, this is my last slide, types of mnemonics. Just these are directly from your book, so there's different ways for you to look at. I encourage you, if you've never used them, or even if you have and maybe they didn't work for you, try different ones. Try different ways that are going to help you with your associations and figure out which ones work for you. I know for science, you're going to have a lot of acronyms. I think for some math too, right? But there's different ways to play with it, especially if you're a musical person. I've had students who've recorded themselves singing or rapping their notes to help them. You can write it out. Remember, chunking is at phone numbers, break it up into small information. Figure out which ones work best for you. That's the best advice that I have, and they might be different per class, and that's okay. Don't use methods that don't work for you just because somebody said this is a perfect fit. It may not be, but play with them, experiment with them, and find the ones that work for you. All right, guys, I know this one's kind of a longer video, but that's all I have for memory and information processing. Thanks.